Well, Ontario plans to introduce new legislation that will require municipalities to get provincial approval before building certain new bike lanes. And the bill would contain other measures the government of Premier Doug Ford says will help fight gridlock and make life easier for drivers. The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick has the details.
News that the provincial government intended to introduce new legislation this fall emerged a couple of weeks ago. And today, the Transportation Minister, Prabmeet Sarkaria, held a news conference and made it official, giving a few more details about what the government is planning. He said legislation will require municipalities to get approval from the provincial government if they want to install a new bike lane that would result in a lane of traffic for cars being taken away. The government saying cities and municipalities will have to demonstrate that the new bike lanes wouldn't have a negative impact on traffic. Now, Sarkaria made this announcement at a business in a part of Toronto where the installation of a bike lane has been quite controversial. There have been some business owners and members of the community that have been lobbying for the bike lane to be reviewed. The local MPP for that area has taken up the cause, and she said at the news conference that there are endless stories about the negative impact of the bike lane in that part of the city of Toronto. She says that she's been hearing that the bike lane has meant more congestion, more traffic congestion, that it's made it hard for emergency vehicles to get around, and that the lane has negatively impacted local businesses. Now, Prabmeet Sarkaria saying the province is stepping in to set these new rules about bike lanes, in part to reduce traffic congestion, saying gridlock is a major problem, especially in the city of Toronto. He says he's not opposed to bike lanes, but he thinks a more informed and balanced approach needs to be taken by municipalities in terms of where the bike lanes are going.
So I think we need to have a more targeted, focused approach. There's room for cyclists, there's room for biking, but gridlock is at an all-time high. And we need to look at solutions that support the communities in which they are. This community, for example, is speaking out very clearly. And we need to know the impacts on businesses as well. So it's about having an approach that supports every member of the community as well.
Now, what does this mean, though, for existing bike lanes? Sarkaria was asked at the news conference about that specific bike lane in Toronto, for example, on Bloor Street. He said, as of now, it's staying in place, but he says the government's also asking municipalities across the province, not just here in Toronto, for data about bike lane projects from the last 5 years. Now, in terms of reaction to today's announcement, the Green Party of Ontario released a statement saying this is a distraction from the fact that the Ford government has no real serious plan to address gridlock. The party's also said in the past that it is concerned about the impact of restricting more bike lanes on cyclist safety in the province. And when news of this proposed legislation started emerging a few weeks ago, we had heard from groups like Environmental Defence, who said it would be a mistake and a regressive policy. We've also heard from Toronto's Mayor, Olivia Chow, who has said she asked Premier Doug Ford to pause moving forward with this legislation while she could hopefully work on a compromise for that one specific bike lane on Bloor Street in Toronto. Doesn't look like the province is going to give her that pause. It sounds like they are planning on introducing this legislation as soon as MPPs come back here to Toronto, to Queen's Park. They're still on their summer recess, but this will be one of the first orders of business when they do come back. Groups like Cycle Toronto are opposed to the government doing this, saying it's an overreach by the province. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, well, one of my next guests thinks this move by the Ontario government is a step in the right direction, while the other thinks Doug Ford should stay in his own lane. Cody MacRae is the founder of Balance on Bloor, an advocacy group that would like to see the City of Toronto rethink bike lanes in some major roadways like Bloor Street. And Micheal Longfield is the executive director of Cycle Toronto. Okay, Cody, let's start with you. You are not opposed to bike lanes. You do think the city has gone a little too far in building bike lanes that aren't working. When did you think the bike lanes became problematic?
Yeah, when they just overreached and pounded it through our community locally with no consultation. They just came in and said it's happening, get used to it. There was no proper consultation. Our community has been speaking loud and clear for the last year that it's not working, that there's major opposition towards it. Again, our group that I founded, Balance on Bloor, we're not anti-cycling. I'm a cyclist myself, recreationally for that matter. But our board of directors are filled with some more hardcore cyclists. We support safe biking infrastructure and bike lanes where they make sense, but they don't make sense in our community, and they've been nothing but problematic the entire time.
Okay, Michael, that is a lot of what we heard from Prabmeet Zakaria today and from the Ford government as well, that they're not opposed to bike lanes, but it needs to be a balance between vehicles on the road and not obstructing those vehicles and bike infrastructure. Why is that not reasonable? Why is what's proposed right now unreasonable?
Well, I mean, I think fundamentally the problem with what the minister is proposing is that this is just a big provincial overreach. Local cities know best where to put these types of infrastructures. Toronto's not casual about where it builds its bike lanes. I mean, Cody was sort of saying there wasn't consultation, but this project was approved in principle under Mayor Tory and the councillor at the time, Mark Grimes. It was approved again at committee where folks had the opportunity to write in, to speak, to address councillors directly with their questions, and then also was then approved, finally again at council with now Mayor Chow and Amber Morley. So there are lots of steps. The city doesn't just randomly point at a line on a map and say we're going to build our bike lanes there. There's a lot of steps of consultations, and ultimately in this case, this bike lane, really does provide a lot of transportation options for folks in that neighborhood. And I understand that there are people who've been biking for a long time who might feel like they're avid cyclists, who maybe feel comfortable biking where there isn't protected infrastructure. But, these bike lanes are about making it easier for everybody to choose to ride a bike, not just so-called avid cyclists who are already biking.
Okay.
I would just like to add something quickly, sorry. Yeah. That, we didn't have the leadership there locally, and we've been neglected for a year, and that is why the province had to step in. Again, when you mentioned a lot of these things can be solved locally, absolutely they can be, but we've been neglected for a year. Like we've been raising our concerns loud and near. Our local councillor has been negligent the entire time, and
She's
they do ram
a consultation
them in.
Tomorrow.
They've been implemented for a year.
She committed to that in February.
It's been entirely rammed through, and again, if it's been consulted, go ask all the businesses on Bloor Street that show and can tell you that they haven't been consulted once on it.
Let me ask you this: is it on the issue of overreach, though? Is it? Because the mayor here, Olivia Chow, is saying, as we heard in Megan's item there, that she wants a pause on this. Is the premier trying to act like the mayor of Toronto?
The mayor voted against any changes to it in June, so I don't know what's changed between now and June.
I mean, do you think that that's a valid point here?
The motion in June was about
mayor had her opportunity.
I think the motion in June was about removing the bike lanes, not about changes or that piece. But again, I think. She still hasn't entertained any conversations with us until the province stepped up. But I think this is the sort of thing too, where again, Toronto or Ontario has, I think, over 400 municipalities. The minister is saying he's going to be the one that decides, which bike lanes can get approved, which one should be removed. That just doesn't seem like a very practical or pragmatic approach on this. Local municipalities, local elected officials, city staff that are sort of working on these things across the province, not just in Ontario, really are the ones who sort of know these things better. It's unreasonable to assume the minister would be able to study street by street, block by block, on whether or not this bike lane makes sense and how it fits into a sort of a greater cycling network, not just a 1 kilometer stretch.
I think you guys would both agree. I mean, we're all in Canada's largest city here in Toronto, and the traffic is horrible.
Of course, yeah.
Problematic.
Is this not one potential solution?
I mean, I would sort of hope if the minister was, committed to reducing congestion, and on some levels, I welcome the province coming in and saying that. But an announcement that was saying, this is committing to the opening of the Eglinton Crosstown or the Finch LRT, these really key transformational projects in the inner suburbs, making sure those things happen, that would be a really important step. The Toronto Board of Trade, did a recent survey. 86% of people said there's a problem with congestion, but 67% of people saying that with congestion, that they were saying the main issue is construction.
Yeah.
That 58% saying too many cars. It's only 21% of people saying other road uses, and that includes bike lanes. People can see what's in front of them.
61% of Torontonians do agree that bike lanes don't belong on major arterial roadways.
Well, let me ask you another question, Cody, on a subject that I know a lot of people are very passionate about online, and that is safety. We have seen in a year 6 cyclist deaths. What do you think is a solution to keep cyclists safe if it's not bike lanes on main streets?
Yeah, I think we just need to do a better job collectively coming together and building proper infrastructure. There's numerous cities around the world, like Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, just put in 150 kilometers of bike lanes. There's numerous cities and municipalities out there in the world, like Vancouver, that are doing it properly. There's loads of places that are doing it properly, except for Toronto, and it's nothing but a problem. We obviously all want people to have access to safe cycling infrastructure, but our perspective is let's do it properly and let's build it properly, not manufacturing. Like the Transportation Association of Canada even says themselves that these bike lanes in the city are seldomly not implemented due to safety, but overall to connect a larger infrastructure network together.
Let me ask you both a final question. Go ahead. You want to counterpoint?
Connecting a network is the important thing of this. People have sort of said, like in the case of Bloor, why can't we find other routes or use side streets? The Bloor Street project that was put in is about, 4.7 kilometers. It's about a 20-minute bike ride at a fairly leisurely pace. To try to make a equivalent route using side streets, it ends up being like over 7 kilometers and almost double the travel time. It makes something that could be practical and safe, just not something most people would do.
Final question to both of you. What is the balance for pedestrians, for cyclists, and for drivers?
I think it's important. I find it, a bit ironic that, Cody's group is called Balance on Bloor. I would argue that what we're seeing on Bloor right now with space for drivers, parking spaces, protected bike lanes, and sidewalks really does reflect the kind of balance we need to see in modern cities.
It does not reflect our community's needs, though. It does not reflect our community's needs. It's been
But you shouldn't be requiring the province to do that. If it's a community issue, it should be addressed within a community.
But it hasn't. We've been neglected by the city. The mayor had a vote on it in June, and she didn't vote on it.
People not agreeing with you doesn't mean you're neglected, though.
All right,
there's
gentlemen.
99% of the people in that area are beside themselves.
Cody, we have a map in the green room. We can look at it. You can plan out that parallel route and see what happens.
Let's have more discussions.
Got to leave it there.
There.
We will see where this conversation goes, and we will have you back both again to continue it. But we got to leave it there for now. Micheal, Cody, thank you for your time. That is Micheal Longfield, who's the Executive Director of Cycle Toronto, and Cody MacRae, the founder of Balance on Bloor.